We should really have a big hello. Let's do this again because that worked so well last time. A big hello to the boys. Yay! A big hello to the girls. A big hello to Dave. Yay! And Dave up the back too. He was just like
Safety Dave. Stole that name.
Yeah.
Trademark.
Yeah. We will not be talking.
That, yeah. I wanted Safety Dave, but he already had it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Risky Dave. Both of them.
What am I saying?
Gee, your trademark lawyer must be rich.
Is there any new people? Anybody that's never been here before? Oh, mate. Well, welcome. So my name's Steve. This is not normally what happens, mate. We're really sensible and we try not to have fun. All right, it's just like every normal safety event. But welcome, mate. So and Josh is here too. So if you need anything from us, just give us a shout. We'll look after you the best that we can. Tonight's sponsor is Avica. Thank you for the guys at Force. We couldn't have Dave come here and then have someone else sponsor it, right?
Like investigations differently.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I know.
Is that Mark Olsen?
Yeah, like Mark Olsen. He would have just jumped straight in and sponsored it.
Just so you're aware, there are other investigation companies that, like we
Not as good.
We can do that too.
We can't show favouritism. So thank you to the guys and Dave for coming up. We really appreciate you being here.
I invited myself.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you this story because it was just amazing. So I was speaking at a conference in Auckland, and I went to the pub, as I do, as unlike me, and I went upstairs, and there was just a guy sitting next to the bar. I thought, I'll go and talk to him. As I do, I talk to anybody in the pub just because I'm like it, right? So this guy was a Pommy, talked a bit like you, mate. He was, and I said, oh, so how you doing? He's like, oh, I'm really good, like, oh, you're Scottish, blah, 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 all the pleasantries. So I said, what are you doing here? He says, I'm going to a gig, I'm doing a gig. And I was like, you're doing a gig? He says, who is it you're going to see? He's like, no, I'm doing a gig. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, I'm in a band, I'm in Slipknot. And I was like, no. I said, no way, man, no way, you're taking a piss. And he pulled his phone out and he showed me all his stuff and all that. It was really cool. Anyway, so a few whiskies later, and he buys the good stuff. Because he was saying to me, oh, you can't drink shit, you're Scottish. And I'm like, oh, it tastes the same to me. I'm like, it doesn't matter what it is. And then we went to another bar, and he was like, well, we'll get some of the top shelf whiskies. It was like $300, right? And then his American Express card didn't work. and I was like, oh no, I'm going to get left with this bill. And I was a bit panicky, but the people behind the bar were like to me, no, this is not on you, this is on him. He ordered it, but they let him away with it. They let him go off, just left his email address, and because everybody was getting pictures. It was quite weird, like everyone's wanting pictures with him and that sort of stuff. But awesome adventure. People in New Zealand are doing some amazing stuff, so you should definitely check out what they're doing. And that was my little adventure. And I put an article on. I asked him what he could teach us about safety. Absolutely fucking nothing. Right? But we went to McDonald's and all. He said, "What do you want?" I was like, "No, I don't want anything." And he was like, 20 chicken McNuggets, 4 Big Mac doubles, and I'm like, "Oh my god." So I just gave mine away, and I was like, this. But it was an amazing experience. We've had Murray from the Wiggles here, V-Man. It was pretty cool. What's the next slide? Have we got that?
You've known Dave for a long time.
I have known Dave for a long time, right? So Dave and I have probably been knowing each other since about 1985. So my very first football game. But I can't say that S word, because if I say S word and it's recorded, I'll be disowned in Scotland, right? The S word, so it's a round ball.
Oh, you mean soccer?
That's the word I'm talking about. So Dave was actually a midfielder in the first game that I ever went to, and he scored an absolute perler of a free kick. And we've actually got footage of Dave scoring this free kick in 1985.
Oh, what a shot. So good.
David Provan! I tell you what, mate, that was super sweet. That was one of the best free kicks.
I remember that day. That was a really great day.
It was a great day, actually.
Yeah.
So that was my very first Celtic game, and David Provan scored one of the goals.
Go Rangers.
That's the end of this interview. Goodbye, everybody. So, Dave, we are super excited to have you here, mate. And you basically nominated himself. You basically nominated yourself, didn't you?
I actually did. After I saw Sydney, after you guys have to put up with people like Greg and Sydney, I'm like, someone might have to come along and be helpful.
Yeah.
And sober.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a few nights where the alcohol has been flowing, so please drink responsibly, everybody. I'm looking at, particularly you, Ken. Like, please drink responsibly. Mate, so we'll have a chat about the book. The plan, do you want to tell everyone about the plan for the books?
Oh, the books, yeah, no, this is really a good story, and it wasn't my fault. But we've got a Melbourne office that's, well, it kind of was. We got a Melbourne office that's like 107 on a particular road, and our Brisbane office is like 207 Logan Road, Wollongabba. And so we sent the books to 107 Logan Road, and Ryan, 45 minutes on the phone to Australia Post, but couldn't reroute the books apparently. So, if you get in touch with Nat, because Nat's not very busy, or get in touch with the team, we'll figure out how to, there's an info@forgeworks.com, get in touch with the team, we're getting them rerouted again back up to the Wollongabba office, and if you're here and you pop out via the office, you can pick up a copy. For free, yeah. We tried, the plan was to be one, I assume the first guest that turns up with a book for everyone, but human error got in the way of the best laid plans and intentions, so yeah.
No, and maybe really appreciate it.
We've had a few sackings in the organisation the last week or so. It's not going to happen again.
Blame fixes a lot of things in our world, as you know. But mate, that book, it really is amazing. But it aligns itself with Safety Futures and the Advanced Safety Professional Program. Is that it?
Practice program.
Program. I've done it already. So.
Clearly, you paid attention.
Well, to be honest, mate, I was scared.
Well.
To be honest, I was scared of Ralph Shreve, so I was just like, oh, look. But no, it's an amazing, absolutely amazing program, but it's so different from normal sort of safety curriculum. Just wondering what your experience is with some of the gaps that people are experiencing, like what they're learning before and then what they learn after. Is it just sort of does it blow their mind?
So, I think as far as all of our roles, is everyone in a health and safety professional role? No one's in the wrong spot. No one's going, this looks pretty interesting. I might just come along in here. But you're in a safety presentation. So I think as safety professionals, we're expected to know a lot and do a lot. But then also we can get stuck in a rut in our roles, right? And you know, I think as professionals, there's a knowledge component to our role and a practice component to our role, and I think we need to think about those two elements of what we do. And so the knowledge component, you know, and things like risk management, shout out to Avitza, because he made me shout out to him that in the sections on risk management and the modules in the Safety Futures program were written by Avitza. But things like safety risk management and some of these real knowledge areas about, you know, how do you effectively design management systems and that, there's a knowledge component to these things, right? And one of the hallmarks of a profession, one of the tenets of a profession is an occupation that has a level of knowledge and understanding about sort of an aspect of work greater than the average person, and it's usually acquired through sort of higher education or programs such as you know, the program that I do. And so the first question becomes, as a profession, what are those knowledge components that as health and safety professionals we have that's greater than the managers or the workers inside our organisation? And so those knowledge components, you know, risk management's one of those, you know, the effective design of management systems, you know, human behaviour, there's things that we need to know and understand more than the average person. But we're a very applied occupation as well. So then there's this practice component, which it doesn't really matter how much you know in our roles if you don't know then how to put that in practice inside an organisation. And this is about communication and influence and change management and facilitation and these types of practice skills. And I just sort of see gaps in both domains. I see some pretty significant knowledge gaps where when you go into a safety team in an organisation, you go, what is it that you know about safety or this business that's far greater than the average manager? Or, you know, how do you give effect to your knowledge? And so certain professions can get away with just the knowledge bit. So I think professions like accounting, engineering, design, there's some that are very knowledge-orientated professions. And then there's practice professions like teaching and nursing and things like that, where it's not just enough to have the knowledge. You need to know how to do something with that knowledge and influence the adoption of that knowledge inside your organisation. So the program and the book's kind of written around trying to bridge and combine the knowledge and practice components of what we need to do as a profession.
Yeah, and that's a great program. If anyone has never done it before, you should definitely
Shout out
it.
starting next week. No,
Yeah.
Enrollments are closed. It's full.
Yeah.
Enrollment's closed, but
Yeah, but seriously, mate, like things like influence and communication, that just doesn't come up in the sort of traditional curriculum. It's something that, and like influence and marketing and communication is something that I've really worked hard on over the past few years to sort of try and change that. Mate, but in that program as well, we talk about safety work and the safety of work.
Yeah.
Curious about how that research came about, and yeah, like obviously, how long did it take to go through all of that, and what were some of the examples of some of the worst?
Yeah, so maybe going backwards and understanding how some of those ideas first, we started discussing some of those ideas, and when I did my PhD, and a few people in the room like Sean McGregor and others who were part of my PhD research and supporting me to sort of make sense of these roles a bit as well. My main part of my PhD research, which was on the design of safety professionals, was kind of motivated by a direction that I was given as an organisation, which is who works in a commodity-based business, mining, oil and gas, something like that. Yeah, right. So commodity price goes down, revenues go down, cost goes out, commodity price goes up. You try and find all those people and rehire them again and build your teams back up, and you just end up in these cycles. And so one of those cycles happened in oil and gas in 15-16, and oil price fell from $130 to $30, and got given the task of, okay, you've got 289 people in your health and safety team, and you can now only have 121. So we need $30 million, we need 57%, we need 168 roles. You've got a few weeks to figure it out. And by the way, as directors, it'd be really bad governance if you increase the level of health and safety risk in the organisation that our workers face. So make this change, but don't increase the level of health and safety risk. And in me, that prompted this immediate reflection of what is the relationship between the work that health and safety teams do and the level of risk that the workers in that organisation face. And that seems like a very obvious thing to think about, but it's something that I've found personally that I hadn't given in leading a large team. I actually hadn't given, constant and conscious thought to. And so that sparked the PhD, which was to go, and my main research was following a group of health and safety professionals over a 8 or 9 months period, not in a kind of creepy stalker kind of look in their bedroom window kind of way, but in a kind of like, meeting with them every week or every second week, and what are the work activities that you're undertaking? Where's this come from? What's triggered this work to be being performed? Like the system requires it, or a manager thinks it's a good idea. How are you approaching it, and what's the outcome you're trying to achieve? And through all that work with all those people over 9 months, what became apparent was not a whole lot of safety professional work was what I called sort of goal-directed risk reduction activity. I'm doing this because our organisation faces this particular risk or issue, and we're working to put in place this additional control or this process or this capability or this piece of equipment to lower the risk that our workers face. And so when we started seeing that and a few other research projects playing out, Drew Ray was my supervisor at the time. I said, there's a whole bunch of safety work stuff going on, but it's not actually doing anything for the safety of the work, for the people doing the work. And at the same time with the other research projects, these two ideas of safety work, safety of work, and safety clutter originated in the Griffith Safety Science Innovation Lab at the same time. And we published both those papers in 2018 to try to actually draw the attention to those things that we do in an organisation that don't add value to operational safety, which is that, and we do in the name of safety, which is that definition of safety clutter, and for organisations to start to think about the relationship between the safety work activities that are going on, all of the audits, the risk assessments, the meetings, the actions, the incident investigations, the induction training and the leadership visits and all those work activities, and the relationship to the level of risk that the workers face when they go about their high hazard work. And so that sort of spawned that, and we wrote about that. And now I talk a lot about two central themes when I'm talking about health and safety. I'm talking about understanding the relationship between the safety work activities in your business and the safety of work. Understanding how to do safety with people, not to people, and understanding what are the aspects of the way that you manage your organisation and you plan and execute work that give rise to increasing levels of safety risks, like the equipment you provide, the productivity targets, the subcontractors you choose, and all those things that we wouldn't typically see as safety-related decisions in a company. So that's sort of been where that came about through that 17, 18, 19 period.
Dave, you must have dealt with heaps of companies. Is there anything that stands out to you that just like, what the hell are you doing this for?
Anybody? Mueller?
Well, there's a couple from the previous company I was in.
Wasn't me.
No, not at all.
Sorry, I tried hard.
But I suppose like we do this crazy stuff, like garbage bin inspection checklists.
Yeah, look, you're all going to have a million ideas. One that stands out for me is we're sort of at the front on the onshore oil and gas industry of doing some things with in-vehicle monitoring systems, which was one of the first times that industry started adopting what professional logistics organisations were using for their heavy vehicle movements, right? Started to think about what are those in-car technologies that can help us understand driver behaviour, driver risk. So we rolled out in-vehicle management systems, and so what we had was, prior to that, we had a journey management plan, where every single journey, some journeys had standard procedures, some were like non-standard journeys, so there was a confusion there. But then people had to say, where am I going, where am I going to stop, when am I going to arrive, when am I leaving, what roads am I taking, do I have 2 litres of water in my car, and am I going to stop every 2 hours, and am I going to call my supervisor when I get there? And so we spent tens of millions of dollars rolling that in-vehicle monitoring system and having a 24/7 national response centre with duress alarms. So we'd implement this so we knew every single vehicle, who was driving it, because they had their driver ID. We knew exactly where they were on the road. We knew exactly where they'd been. We had 24/7 monitoring of it. And I went out in the field like 12 months later, and everyone was still doing journey management plans. Like still doing the forms, because everyone with the implementation, they forgot to tell everyone that, oh, by the way, this control now replaces this administrative process. So we talked about duplication and doing, multiple things. And, I've also seen organisations with 7 different task-based risk management processes.
Yeah.
Like I need to do a JSA that identifies the hazards and risks, and then I need to do a work permit that identifies the hazards and risks, which has got a task risk assessment TRA attached to it. And then, if there's an operating procedure, I need to have that, and then I need to take 5 as well. And one organisation, there were 7 different processes that they all did for every task. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, mate, they're terrified, aren't they, to take stuff away? I feel like they just...
Oh, lift the mic up?
Yeah,
That-
I know it's loud for you, but
It's loud for me. It's not? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
it's not about you.
Yeah, it's everybody's brain.
It's about you. Oh, sorry, Josh. It's all about Josh. Booked 3 seats for himself and a jug of beer.
But that's our jug of beer. Dave, he has to look after us. But I was talking about IVMS. Oh, man. Like, I remember having a conversation with someone. They were saying, oh, that IVMS is the best thing that's ever been put in a vehicle. I says, have you got one in your own car? No. And I says, well, you keep your family in your car. Why wouldn't you have one? It was like, it's just the best thing that's ever been done. Like, we know who's doing what, and we know who's not wearing seatbelts. Yeah. And I've seen stuff where they've actually went into somebody's truck or car, and they've had their sleeves rolled up, and they've pinned them because they've had their sleeves rolled up. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh man.
But what's interesting about that, and this is just good for other people and not for me, and in business, because when we actually did that process. When we're talking about it as an executive team and getting the funding approval, because it was a significant investment at a level where you've still got in a lot of risk, they're going, but there's no regulatory requirement to do this, right? So this is an actual looking at the risk exposure and then thinking about from a risk reduction due diligence perspective, thanks, Avitsa, what is an ALARP position for this risk based on our exposure? And this was sort of like the process of trying to get the investment. And I said that to the executive team. I said, here's what we're going to do, just because I don't want this technology misused and damaging our culture. We can get some portable units, and for the next 3 months, we're going to put a portable unit in all of your executive personal cars. And every week, I'm going to give you some one-on-one feedback on your driving performance, and how you've been driving, just so that you do this. And I was like, no. Yeah. But the point, right? Like, it's a very different story for an organisation to say, we've been trialling this technology ourselves, we've been getting the feedback, this is what we've learned, this is how we're going to roll it out to make it a very constructive process in the organisation, right? And it goes back to this doing safety with people, not to people. Very different change management exercise than just, this is what you now need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that IVMS it's not going away anytime soon. But I kind of feel that's one of those sacred cows, isn't it? It's like one of those things that we can never, once it's in, but it's just never going to take it away, I don't think.
I think in a lot of this, it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
IVMS is it's good technology. Like it's wonderful. There's wonderful upside and wonderful risk reduction upsides to it, but it's how organisations manage the process around it. Same with incident investigation. It's a good thing to do to look at the events that happen and try to understand how to stop it happening again. Auditing, good to go out and try to understand work as done against what you imagine it to be. So all these things that a lot of times in safety one we say that's shit, that's shit, that's shit. It's not actually the intention of the process, whether it's induction training good, auditing good, investigation good. You can make all of those processes really hoppy and really useful and effective and welcomed by your organisation.
Yeah, well, mate, that leads on to the next question then about...
Nice one.
And like, yeah, well, we'll forget about that other one, but just when you were talking about...
Well-oiled machine.
Yeah. We kind of know what we're doing, don't we, Gary? We know what we're up to now. But that shift from safety professionals being the compliance enforcers to this more facilitation and enabling of learning. Now, as someone who's been looking at quite a lot of position descriptions over the past couple of weeks and months.
Did you get any of those jobs?
No, I don't want them, mate. Because when you see them, because when you actually see the position descriptions, I'm just like, nah, that is so backwards. That is not something that I want to be a part of.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how long do you think it'll be before companies actually start to go, hey, we actually need people who are able to facilitate rather than these safety cops, which are, as we know, they're still around. There's more of them than what there is of us, actually.
I think I think the position descriptions are going to take time to change. I mean, I don't know how many companies even give a shit about how up-to-date their position descriptions are, unless they're doing an ad. And if they're putting out an ad, it's probably HR or someone who's written a position description and file saved as something from somewhere else, right? So it may not be a great reflection of the role. If I was looking at an organisation and looking at a role, I'd say, who's going to be my boss and who am I working with in my team, right? And so I'd actually go and find organisations, leaders. Like if I ever went back into an organisation, which no one's ever going to put me back inside a real organisation ever again, but it'd be based on a conversation that I have with the CEO. What are you really trying to achieve? This is how I think this should happen. How do you feel about the way we're going to do it? And so that would be my advice. Like, give people the benefit of the doubt in the PD if it sounds like it might be an interesting position in an interesting organisation, and just go and find out who the people are inside it.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. I remember when I was recruiting, I made sure that all the PDs were changed, and I was getting all the messages coming through. It was like, oh wow, we've never seen anything like that before. I was feeling pretty smug with myself. But even then, it was pretty hard to get people who'd see themselves as like facilitators and enablers, and it was really quite challenging.
Daunting, though.
Oh yeah, mate. Yeah, when you're talking about shifting a whole, Josh and I used to talk about decades and decades of thinking, but after my trip to Scotland, we're centuries. We are talking centuries of thinking. Mate, I'm going to talk to you about. I know you've got a couple of podcasts on the go.
Yeah.
Can you read upside down? I have to make it big because my eyesight's getting
I've never been given the questions before, and you sent me them yesterday, and I didn't look at them.
So mate, you've got a couple of podcasts on the go. You've got obviously the safety of work one, which is massive. But I want to ask you about punk rock safety. As a big music fan like me, is that because you're a bit of a rebel, a safety rebel that came to be?
How did it come to be, or why me?
Both. Yeah.
So safety of work fills a some kind of semi-useful need. And when I started that in 2019, there was 4 outcomes in my PhD, and one of them was about this absence of goal-directed risk reduction activity. The second was that safety professionals don't have an evidence-based narrative for what we do. Now we're talking 7 or 8 years ago, so not often, or in fact not at all. At least in some of my parts of the research, was the narrative that the organisation is currently facing this problem or this opportunity. The particular research or evidence or theorising in this space suggests that for us, in our context, faced with this situation, this particular solution or program or approach is likely to make the improvement that we're trying to achieve. Right? This idea of evidence-based practice. And the solution, when you talk to academics about that, like Sidney Decker at the time, will be people need to fucking read papers, right? And read the books. It's all out there. They just need to fucking read them. And I'm like, no one's reading your fucking journal papers, right? Most of them can't even get them because they're behind paywalls. And so I went and found a softer target, and I went to Drew, or a more responsible target, and went to Drew, or maybe a more reliable target, and went to Drew and I said, look, I get it, right? I get that this stuff is all published. but it's not published in a way that's easily accessible for safety professionals to connect with this. And Drew at the time had the Disaster Cast podcast, and if you get a chance to listen to the back catalogue, it like shaped a lot of my thinking through my PhD, and amazing podcast. And so I went to him and said, how about we do this podcast that helps us try to translate different research findings into something that might be a little bit more useful by health and safety practitioners, and digestible in a way that it's more accessible for people. And Todd Conklin, the pre-accident podcast, was sort of ramping up, and I still quite tell or proud of the fact that I did have a pre-COVID podcast, because there's now a lot of podcasts. Something like 90% of podcasts get less than 10 listens per episode or something. Like, there's a lot of people talking out there with not a lot of people listening to them, which I guess is the problem with the internet and things like this today. But it was that idea of trying to provide something useful.
Yeah.
It's 50.
Josh and I will watch this 9 times each.
Yeah, perfect. Click, like, share, subscribe, like.
Bell.
Get your kids to like it as well, or your burner accounts to like it.
We would never use burner accounts or bots.
So that's a particular medium, and there's a particular need around it. And then I was already sort of close colleagues and friends with Ben Goodhart, based out of Colorado, who's the engine behind the Punk Rock Safety podcast. And when he came out to Wollongong we, as part of a sponsorship, Forge Work sponsorship, who went to Wollongong?
Yes.
How good was Safety Stock?
Yes.
Better than the Safety Differently book club. No? Tough crowd.
If you do that again, is there any chance we could do a live book club and then have the rock?
We'll do something different next time. But so I was a late night WhatsApping with Ben and said, we've got some spare tickets as part of the sponsorship. Do you want one? And I woke up the next morning with an itinerary on my WhatsApp that he was going to come out, which is fantastic. So we were catching up. And he mentioned this idea of punk rock safety, and he'd bought or acquired punkrocksafety.com like a decade prior or something, because it was this idea of this. And as you connect with people over music, and I'm sure not everyone in this room as a teenager was an aspiring health and safety professional. So in varying degrees, not looking at you directly, Steve, but in varying degrees, we probably had varying misspent youths. But I was very kind of into the punk rock scene, and then we started talking about the rigidity and the narrow-mindedness and the thinking that we have in safety, and then the more of the philosophy around punk, which is trying to new things, experimentation. There's nothing bad, there's nothing good. It's just what's going to work or what's liked by people at that time. And what a lot of punk rock artists are trying to do is not worry that you're Taylor Swift trying to sell out the MCG at an Eras tour or something, but you're happy to pay for $10 a ticket in some underground club somewhere just because you love the music and you love what you're doing. And so we just talked a lot, and this was Ben's original idea about, just finding different ways for people to think about what we do in health and safety. And that was kind of Punk Rock Safety. 30 episodes in, next episode.
Yeah, no, it's very good, mate. I really do enjoy listening to it. But I'm going to go back to Disaster Cast, and I'm just going to talk straight into this camera and say, Drew, get rid of Dave and bring Disaster Cast back, because it is amazing. Is it still available?
Yeah,
last time I
looked, there's a back catalogue. Otherwise, I'll sort it out.
Yeah, I did try to find it, because it is absolutely, again, it shaped my thinking. Yeah, as soon as I started listening, I was like, oh wow, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And same for me. Drew really, I tell him this all the time. I indulge him and say, hey, it was your podcast that changed my thinking. It was amazing. Mate, I'm going to...
Still on the first page, by the way.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But,
it's not me, it's you.
Yeah, it's a combination, but you're doing amazing, because I want to get to the audience. I want to get to the audience question that I was given. But first, mate, it's bloody safety clutter.
Yeah. That's
one of those things. What advice would you have for people trying to have these conversations about clutter and how to remove some of it?
So since we just talking about podcasts, not to replay, because but Drew, only one or two episodes ago, we did an episode on using substitution as a method for decluttering, and there was some work out of the healthcare on de-implementation, because as healthcare evolves as an evidence-based practice, certain treatments that doctors and nurses are trained to apply to patients in certain situations actually get replaced by new and more up-to-date medical thinking. Give people antibiotics when they first show signs of infection. No, oh no, antibiotics resistance is a thing. So in certain situations, children and others, we don't want to immediately apply antibiotics. There's other ways to understand the severity. So they talk in the healthcare profession about de-implementation. And so one of the theories that goes there is about substitution. And this paper that we talked about in the podcast, and I'll leave it there, is just a 5 principled criteria for if you want to replace one practice and replace it with your best thing is to actually not say don't do that. Because if people are still faced with the same situation at their work, you're basically saying don't do that because it's clutter, but in their mind, they're feeling like, well now, what do I do in that situation, or what do I need to do, or am I exposed to more safety risk? So that was one of the things that when we first did the clutter work, we thought, oh, this is going to give companies permission to stop doing stuff and stop doing stuff and stop doing stuff. But the substitution tests are really interesting. It's kind of like, is there a clear and compelling reason why this process that you're talking about is better? So if you sort of said, if you're going to go to your organisation and say, our incident investigation process is fucked, takes a whole heap of time, doesn't lead to any learning or improvements in work, we're going to stop doing investigations. That's actually not necessarily a great approach of decluttering. What might be if you suddenly said, oh, we might want to do learning teams instead of incident investigation, because learning teams are a thing. You go, okay, well, there's a 5 criteria test. Like, does it make sense to the person about why that this is a better solution in that context? Does it fit within their existing capabilities and skills? Like, can they actually do what you're asking them to do? Can it be achieved with equal or less time? Because giving someone something that's harder and longer to do is things, and there was 2 more that I forget. But the idea was to actually think about going back to the original intent of a process, like I said, which is we do investigations because of a really sensible underlying intent, which is let's understand something we didn't plan to happen has happened. Let's understand it as best we can and try to work out how we can change so that that unplanned situation doesn't happen again. Great intent. What we're now talking about, what might be a better process to achieve that. And so that's been the learning for me with clutter. It's not that the intention of the activity is clutter. It's how the activity is being applied, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about clutter. And so we've got to think about those 2 things. What is the intention of this process? And is the process delivering on that intention? Or is there a better way to deliver on that intention? And so, yeah, extra download on that episode, please.
Yeah. But when you talk about that stuff, like I said earlier, I sometimes think organisations just absolutely struggle. When you start talking about removing documents, paperwork, it just absolutely, I think it kills them. And in some cases, they want to add even more. It's really, it's a big conversation that we need to keep having, and lots of education, I think. And it needs to come from guys like Greg Smith and Michael Tuma, I think, to really help that. We had one audience question. I put the call out and I only had one person respond.
He did tell me that he no longer gives the opportunity for people to ask questions because everyone's just.
We'll do that.
Oh really?
No, we've got plenty. We've got plenty. Remember what happened the last time?
Oh, okay.
No.
So this is from Craig. Craig asked a question about you've obviously led some pretty big teams, and as you were starting to go through your shift in knowledge, and you were hanging around with guys like Sidney Decker and Drew and all that sort of thing, how did you influence your teams, mate, to start sort of thinking a wee bit differently?
I think good question.
Well done, Craig.
So there's 2 aspects to that. One is think about what you're doing as a role model. So think about every single word that comes out of your mouth and where you're spending your time, and be the change that you want to see in the world. So that's a big one. So one of the most impactful situations that I had was actually a general manager was presenting a significant incident, high potential incidents, PL4+, whatever you call those, hypos, SIF, I don't know what you call them, but presenting an incident to a governance thing and said, this is what happened. The contractor did this and they shouldn't have done this and blah, 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 blah. And so the rest of the group was going, what did you do? Oh, we sacked the contractor and all this. And I knew that was going to go because I knew that discussion was happening in the business. And I'd done a bit of digging for myself and said, can I just talk about this incident in a different way? And, shout out to the late Richard Cook for his work on the tale of 2 stories. There's never one truth around what's happening. There's just, an individual's perspective on that. I've done some work, and this contracting team was meant to be supplied with a piece of equipment that they were never actually supplied with because the engineering team had never sent the specification to procurement and it had never been bought. So they were never even given the piece of specialised equipment that was on us to provide to them. This was the end of a shutdown, and they were trying to reinstate some equipment to recommence production. And what they'd done is they'd done this lifting process, and the way they'd done is they'd stopped, they'd done a risk assessment, they'd really tried to figure out how they might be able to do it. It was a lift, and they'd done this lift, and they'd suspended the load about 10 mil above the ground. They left it suspended for about 8 or 10 minutes, then the rigging equipment failed, it fell to ground. Then they actually called us as the client and said, okay, here's what we've tried to do. Okay, and we lifted it, and we did it safely, it fell, there's no damage to the equipment, but we're really going to need you guys to send out that equipment so that we can actually get this job done for you, and we know how much this is costing you, and we're ready to bend over backwards and do whatever we need to do. The guys are ready to do it, we just need this piece of equipment. And then the rest of the room went, oh, that contract is amazing, they're fantastic, they should be the people that we have working for us, and what do we do? And it was that opportunity that you have as an individual to sort of provide a narrative to the organisation that sets an expectation for how others should be thinking and talking and doing that. So I actually think as individuals, you can actually do a lot just by the way that you move around your organisation and interact with your team. And the second piece of that, I think, as a leader, is if you are leading a health and safety team, I know how many people have health and safety people working for them. All right. It's busy in senior roles, in senior safety roles, and there's a lot of expectation that you're out there in committee meetings and working with leaders, and you sort of got to remember that first and foremost, your role is to lead your team and make sure that you've the time and the resources and the availability for your team, because counter to what I just said about one person, your team can sort of 10x your impact through the organisation. And when I work with global safety teams, I kind of say, what if every single conversation on every single day that every single health and safety person had with one of their stakeholders in the organisation went a certain consistent way based on the change that you're trying to make in the organisation? How powerful would that be as opposed to a whole bunch of safety people talking about safety in a whole bunch of different ways?
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. That'd be another one to just pull out and have it on its own.
Here all day.
Yeah, what's that?
Oh.
Yeah, here all day. No, we've only got 10, 15 minutes left.
They boot you out?
But no, it was a brilliant answer.
No. We're saying you're fucking doing a good job.
Talking.
Yeah, we're gonna. How many beeps are we gonna have to put in this? Particularly the Sydney Decker beeps. Beep beep. Yeah, Dave, I've heard you talk before about in our roles we have this unique opportunity to get through the whole organisation,
yeah.
And I know that when I had roles like Queensland state roles or national roles, I basically
Queensland national roles.
No, Queensland.
The whole of the country's
no.
Queensland.
Well, when I had Queensland roles or I had national roles, I was able to get across basically meet everybody in the whole company.
Scotland's only a small country.
Yeah, I didn't want. I was a mechanic in Scotland, but just people that struggle to get influence or gain influence. Just what advice or what should be reading or watching, or what can we do?
One of the ForgeWorks company values is don't be a dick. Like that's literally one of the values, right? Don't be a dick. And I think we have to influence so many people at so different levels. Like to make safety work in an organisation, it's every person, every role. You've got to be able to influence the narrative at the board, at the executive, in the HR department, in the IT department, in the projects department, the engineering department, the logistics department, the HR department. If I was City Decker, I'd be the human remains department, or something, and then get kicked out. And the frontline workforce, right? You have to be out in the field, like connecting with mechanics and practical people. So being just a genuinely likable person. And I say that, and sort of people go, oh, safety shouldn't be a popularity contest. It's kind of like, grow up, it is. Like people we're humans, and you can test yourself on this. People don't listen to people they don't like. Like they just don't. Like and so you actually have to be someone that people can connect with, and people can come and be vulnerable with. And people ask, and it just comes down to just thinking of your role as primarily a people connection role. And it doesn't matter if it's the mechanic or directors of people too. They've got kids and grandkids, and they only want what's best for their organisation, and they just want to see you as being someone that equally cares, that equally wants to understand their position, and equally wants to kind of partner with them to go and make a change in a way that doesn't piss them off, right? Doesn't stop them from hitting their production targets or take too much cost and all those real, balancing acts that your stakeholders have. So,
basically what Dave was saying, don't be a dick and be more human. I think that's what you're trying to say.
And use comedy.
Well, mate, that's how I started it, because I was like, how can I get more influence? I told you before, I was looking at a marketing degree, psychology degree, or human factors, and I saw a thing on Facebook about comedy, and I thought, I'm going to have a crack at this. And that's had the biggest impact, I think, on my training and when I talk to people.
And I think,
and I actually think I'm not a dick.
Huh.
So
Mary Angley, who's a US civil rights activist and poet, she sort of said this quote that people don't remember what you said; they remember how you made them feel, right? And so when you think about every interaction you have with a stakeholder in your organisation, you go, how do they feel during that interaction? Do they feel criticised, judged, devalued, ignored, or do they feel supported, motivated, valued, inspired, cared for, and those things? And if you can think, emotions leak in interaction. If you can think about what emotional response do I want this person to have from my engagement with them, right? And to influence behaviour, actually in one of the safety work podcasts, there's a reason, when you're driving down the highway and you see like this, don't speed or you'll get a ticket, or don't drive or you'll be dead, or something like that. That's actually trying to trigger a fear motivation in you to adjust your behaviour. And the research kind of says that to adjust behaviour, it's not a rational process for humans. There needs to be an emotional connection to change the way we're thinking and acting in a situation, right? It's not a rational process. And so, you need to think about creating that, you don't influence without emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you totally. Be human, man. Totally. Yeah. All right. I'm going to skip a couple of questions, Dave.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we'll
I can give shorter answers.
But
we used to have 10 past.
Yeah, but that's cool. Well, I want to ask you a question about working at a very large, in Australian terms, a very large bureaucratic sort of company that had a crack at doing safety differently, and then it kind of failed. I went back, and then they tried to go again. I just wondering, how can we go over this? And I know Georgina's going to be doing this sort of her PhD on this work. But how do we keep the momentum going, and how do we make this change stick?
I think my reflection, and if we're talking about the company, that's my fault. You need to understand, the capability and the process in the organisation and how to make that sticky, right, and stick. And so, and that's sort of all about institutionalisation, right? Because companies are institutions, and there's a lot of research in institutional studies about, the logics at play in organisation, what defines institutional work, and all of this. And I really think that what I didn't do when I tried to do this is it was a lot of in the moment stuff. Mm-hmm. Let's do learning teams across the business. Let's do a whole bunch of training for leaders or workshops with leaders. Let's add some extra things in. But the underlying business processes that an organisation runs on a set of business processes, I never built any change into the underlying business processes. And some of the work I do now with organisations go, okay, recruitment and selection process for leaders. What needs to happen in every interview with every person who's going to go into a leadership position in your organisation to make this stick? And get the HR to put that in their recruitment process and train them, and that's how they're going to recruit leaders. And what happens in the first 6 months? What's the coaching program support for leaders? But what's going into our contractor selection process, and whether it's taking recordable injuries and having an engagement workshop with contractors pre-mobilisation. So then the supply chain goes, this is the way we work now. And so if what tends to happen at the moment is the head of safety leaves, in that case, I move on. In other cases that I'm sure will be researched, which is when the head of safety leaves, what happens? And in my experience, at least the limited case studies I can think of, it was that the institutionalization of change had never occurred in the capabilities and the processes of the organisation. And then it should be survivable by someone leaving, because you've got all these teams that's their way of working, and they may not know all of the, why the opportunity was provided in the first place or why all that stuff started, but that's the idea. The fun thing about hot bingo is try to find as many ways. There's a lot of words that start with OP, so there's lots of opportunity to. Fun. But
I got it, mate. I heard that. That's why you got the right spell.
But the idea is kind of like to make it more to make the organisation resilient to the individual leaving the organisation, right? And I don't think any of us have really necessarily, and maybe it's too early, but I don't think we've given enough thought to the institutionalisation of the change. And so companies, like, they've done all these learning teams and done all this stuff, and you go, what's your incident investigation process? Oh yeah, we still do incident investigations in the way that we always did them. Okay, well, that's not that's a very brittle organisation that as soon as one or two people leave is likely to just be unrecognisable again in a couple of weeks.
Well, you know, we've definitely experienced that. But a couple of people have had a crack at it. It just doesn't seem to
But if
stick.
you look at someone like Matthew
I was just about to ask you.
at Clutter Services and what they've built in with their capacity model and his 900 safety people around the world for their 65,000 people, they've probably done the best that I've seen of institutionalising this stuff, like making it resilient to one or two individuals leaving that organisation. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So the case studies are starting to appear, and I think we need to think more and more about what do we need to sustainably shift.
When I was in New Zealand, they kept talking about how Brisbane is like the hotbed of HOP and safety differently and all that sort of stuff. Keen to understand, you work all over the world. Who does this work really well? You mentioned Quanta there, but is there other companies that really have a crack?
Look, I think companies are trying, which is what I like.
Yeah.
So like lots of industries that were a bunch of mining folk in the room the last 3 or 4 years, probably the biggest eye-opening, sort of the biggest growth in awareness has probably been the mining sector globally, and like we can't just keep doing what we've always done expecting a different result. Like we need to think more broadly. So I think it feels to me like there's a more openness to think about it in a different way. I think what we're lacking a lot is what is the organisational wide practical application look like I've just said. What does the integration of and the evolution of existing practices kind of need to look like? And I think that's where organisations are challenged to do it more comprehensively. And so what I typically see is more pockets of excellence. Like this organisation does this really, really well. This organisation, work with one organisation that really has a do safety with people, not to people, but it's been informed by a decade of work on company values. And this is what it means to be in our company. It's nothing to do with, so it's just a perfect opportunity to, I missed it myself, to do HOP or something like that, because it's actually built on a really strong, sustainable foundation of company values. But they still got some really shit safety practices in their organisation, safety management practices and things like that. So, I don't think there's too many up in lights case studies.
Yeah. Lots, centuries and centuries, right? We're trying to shift it. Mate, in the book, and I had a quick look at it again, just so I had a...
So centuries and centuries, like rail. Gary worked in rail a bit, right? I started in rail. So anyone know why standard gauge is the width that it is? Hey?
Horse and carriage.
Yeah, it's the width of two horses' asses standing side by side, right? Because in the 15th century, when they had to build all the Roman roads, they had to be wide enough for a horse-drawn cart by two things. And when they went and laid railroad tracks, there was the grooves that the horses walked in. They used that to lay all the railroad tracks. So, in 2025, the railway tracks are the width they are because it's the width of two horses' asses pulling a carriage, right? And it's an international sort of... And in Queensland...
Take it further to the width of a rocket goes up in space.
Yeah, because it has to go through a tunnel. Yeah. And even winter... Yeah, and that's why a rocket booster, should have been actually bigger, but it couldn't fit through the tunnel to get to the manufacturing facility. And why does Queensland have narrow gauge 3'6" railways? Because we need to save sleepers. So, if you'd make it 3'6" instead of 5'2", you get extra, every third sleeper is free, right? And so when you're trying to build rail across the scale of something like Queensland, and you don't have a lot of, horse tracks to work with, you try to save money by reducing the amount of timber you need to lay track. But it goes to show, like, a lot of the industries that we're in are like hundreds and hundreds of years of doing things in a certain way.
Yeah, totally, mate, totally. And if you learn anything from this chaos, have a listen to about horses' arses and inform rail tracks.
I'm just trying to make up some time.
No, mate, we've got heaps of times. But what I was going to say, you talk about bringing all the safety theories together, or have a look and try and essentially create your own practice. I'm just wondering if you have a particular theory that you lean on the most.
So, no. Because I think they all lack in some different ways. But interestingly, how much time can I do?
Mate, you got more, whatever, everyone...
We'll still
okay,
well, we might ask some audience questions or not, and then we'll get the music
how many
questions.
have we got left?
Well, we've got one or two, but You answer it as you.
Well, this is a okay. All right, so
It's
this is a little fun thing combining theoretical progress and personalities, right? So where we started with looking for capacity in organisation for safety was high reliability organisation theory, right, in the 80s, which came off 3 Mile Island and a bunch of disasters where people said, let's go and try and find safe organisations and understand what makes them tick, right? So we get HRO principles, high reliability organisations, and 5 principles that Wyke and Sutcliffe put out in the first Managing the Unexpected book. And so, okay, great, we've got 5 principles. And Dave Woods comes along, and I love the guy. I think he's one of the greatest thinkers of our time in health and safety. He said, no, but organisations need something that they can actually do. So this should be an engineering discipline. We need to be able to engineer our organisations to be more resilient, right? What are the practices and protocols and capabilities that real organisations need to be able to do this? Going from HRO principles to organisational practice. So we create resilience engineering in the early 2000s. And then it becomes all about engineering and a lot about mechanics and working in highly engineered systems. And then depending on who you ask, I think Decker will admit that Safety 2 was before Safety Differently, but Eric sees the application particularly in safety and goes, it's fine to talk high reliability organisations and resilience engineering, but there's a real challenge with the safety domain. So let's do Safety 1 and Safety 2 and help people understand the differences between what we're talking about and what safety is. So we've now got Safety 1 and Safety 2. And Sydney comes along and goes, well, that's all fine, but all you engineers have missing the human aspect of all of this. So let's talk about the people. People aren't a problem to control, and just culture, and what does it need to feel like inside an organisation? And then, Todd comes along and goes, that's all fine, but no one understands all this shit. So let's come up with 5 really simple principles, which is HOP. And I don't have a problem with any of those ideas, but something like HOP, for example, is like, for every complex problem, there's a simple solution that's wrong. Right? And it's fine. That's a great place to start. And Todd would say, start with redefining how your organisation thinks about incidents. But I did a little bit of work. And then Dave Woods in 2017 published Graceful Extensibility, which, if you can interpret the words he's using, actually makes the most sense out of all of them. But I did a Safety Work podcast episode with him, like 24. And it was like an hour 24 long, and I think my speaking time is about 3 minutes in an hour 24. So you think this is a long conversation. But then I actually spent some time in OSU at Ohio State during my PhD to actually write about this with him, and he was really gracious and let me spend a lot of time in his lab. And we wrote Graceful Extensibility, but then we've got in ForgeWorks sort of a Venn diagram and a table with a set of 8 consolidated principles for managing the safety of work, which takes all of those ideas and theories and bits and pieces and just goes, understand how work is really done at the front line, balance the operational demands of, frontline resources and stuff, and, develop a culture of care amongst leaders in the organisation. And just to try to actually go, look, there's good bits of all of these things, but on their own, none of them are complete for an organisation. And also none of them are overly practical in the organisation. So that's a really long answer to do I have a favourite theory, but I think it's important to say that I don't think any of them solve for everything that you need, right? So understand your problem, then understand which theory might be useful in the context of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a brilliant answer.
We're here to offend people a little bit.
Just when you were talking about your PhD and all this sort of stuff, have you got something else that you're going to research? Is there anything that have you got anything you're planning?
No, work and life gets busy. But I think what I'm focused on now is building what I've learnt into real organisational practices. I think that we've spent enough time around whiteboards, and there's been enough people pontificating and writing the latest book, and I don't think we're a profession that needs more ideas. We're not a profession that needs more untested ideas. Yeah. Right. And I'm seeing work going on in a whole bunch of spaces where I go, there's 3 other ideas out there already in this space that we still don't know if they work or not. Let's knuckle down a little bit and actually work with real organisations on practice. So I guess that's where my focus. Still got a lot of ideas for things that I think can help, but I sort of skip the academic research piece and just try to find companies who are interested and say, how about we try this? And doing some work with amazing organisations now. I mentioned those 7 task-based risk management organisations that's gone, okay, a worker comes through the gate and they go to a pre-start, and then they do a whole bunch of safety shit, and then they start their work. Yep. Can we relook at all that safety shit they do and everything that's in that space of permits and JHAs and take 5s and the 90 minutes of hoops that they need to jump through before they hop in a truck and start driving, right? And I think that's the practical problems that we need to take all of these ideas now and start, organisations need to start thinking about solving. I think that solves the clutter stuff. I think, and if you do it in a very worker-centric, human-centered way, it solves the doing safety with people, not to people. It solves the safety work, safety of work. It's just how do we create safety every day, and do we think what we're doing is creating it? And if not, how might all of these ideas inform a way to do it?
Yep, no, awesome, mate. Josh, audience questions, or are we cutting this?
Up to you.
Well, we've been up for nearly an
Yeah.
hour, mate, so let's call it quits. All right, Dave, punk rock safety.
Yeah, no questions. I can hang around.
Yeah,
I
but
won Forex Gold, so like this is
and we've,
the most intelligent you'll ever get me.
and we've got and we have got this jug here.
And those who know know. Those who know.
Yeah, we've been here before.
It's a well-worn path.
All right, Dave, couple of music questions, because this is how we like to finish.
All right.
So punk rock safety, obviously, so we kind of get the idea of kind of music that you might be into. But, mate, what's the song that's going to get you up blasting out some tunes on the karaoke?
Oh, karaoke.
Well, that's question one.
Look, there may or may not be some video evidence of me with a certain Eminem song, I think. But that's for another day.
What was the Eminem song?
No, I don't know. I don't remember.
All right, well, so I know that you dance, and the reason I know that...
I don't.
I've seen you, mate. When we were at Wollongong, I said this to... What was it? What was the song that got you on the dance floor?
At the end, I don't even remember.
Yeah, I know, I did. Actually.
There's video of that too. I got a 360-degree camera. We've never seen, again, footage of that last song at Safety Stock.
I remember saying that to Ben Hutchison as well. He says, what was the song that you were dancing to? He was like, I was dancing.
No, Prisoner of Society. It was Prisoner of Society. Yeah, it was. Living End, yes.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Dave, what an honour for us to interview you and chat to you and talk to you. Everybody, Dave Provan.